Hey guys, Darren Carr here, Coach of Wise Pods, and welcome back to another episode of the Club Preview Series. On today's episode, we are talking about the woeful West Coast Eagles. Let's get into it.
All the pain.
So the West Coast were pretty poor in 2024, finishing 16th on the AFL ladder, and probably expected to stay the same. To be honest, this year, when I look at their list, particularly their best 2020, best 22, we're looking at right here, I just don't really see the upside. They lost some pretty big names, which probably affected their real structure and their real spine to how good their team was previously. I think their potential is just going to stay really much the same, and I do probably expect them to be finishing 17th. I don't really expect them to improve much more. I think they can't be much for. I don't think they can be as worse as Richmond. I expect them to be pretty bad, but I think they'll be that next little bit step up from there. So probably a bit of a step back, just because I think North Melbourne will probably improve more than they will. But yeah, they'll in terms of a growth and a talent growth year for them, they're really stepping in that direction. So, but we're here to look at fantasy, and we're really here to looking at what changes they've made in the off season. So, they brought in Liam Baker, Jack Graham, and Matt Always in terms of trade. So, obviously, Liam Baker and Jack Graham came from Richmond, and then Matt Always has come from Carlton. And while they're good names, and obviously the two Richmond boys are premiership players, they're far from stars in my eyes. Like, they're really good footballers, but they're more workhorses. They're not the outstanding stars that are going to make a huge impact on their team. So I don't expect them to be as influential as what other people do. So I'm a bit skeptical on what they have to offer. Whereas their outside, like I said, Tom Barras is probably the biggest name that they could have lost. He's one of their biggest stars that they've had for so long. He's such an underrated key back. I think if I was to rate him, he'd quite easily be in the top five key backs in the game currently. You know, you're looking at Jacob Wiedering, Sam Taylor's. I would put him in that sort of category. He's just that good at intercepting and really playing on a key back. So I think that really hurts them in terms of their depth and their defensive structure. So I think they're going to struggle in that department extra this year. That they're relying on the likes of a Harry Edwards or a Ruben Jimby if he's going to play that key defensive role. I just think that that's going to really hurt them and potentially lead them to be smacked quite a few times. So that's a huge out for them. Jack Darling probably is not quite as a big out, but he did end up taking a big key forward for them. So that really hurts their spine as well. So now they're having to rely on Waterman as playing on that key position player a lot more often than what he did last year, where he really did have that breakout season. Oscar Allen's obviously a very dangerous key forward as well. So I think he's obviously going to cop the other attention. Besides that, they had Gaff retire, so that's not a huge loss. He didn't play too many games in 2024. And besides that, they had a huge amount of delistings, which was mostly depth, but that did include a Witherden, which is pretty significant considering he played a lot of games in 2024 and has been, a pretty big name for them for the past couple of years, especially in fantasy as well. So definitely there's two spots available in the back line, one being key position and one being, a halfback sort of distribution role. So we'll get into that a little bit later. In terms of the draft, they went to the draft with pick 16 and picked up Bo Allen. He's definitely one that we'll want to be talking about later in this video, so stick around for that. But the first player that I want to talk about, and is probably the most highly owned in their team so far, is no surprise, is the likes of Liam Baker. He is priced at 79, so just a little over 800k. He is a forward mid eligible, so that's why he is so popular at the moment, because he potentially slots in as a F1 F1 role for us and potentially provide some value. But I am unsure of what role he's going to play. There's rumors that he'll play this halfback role that we sort of expect. Like I said, with Witherden out, that does leave that halfback role available. And that's what we have seen him do in the past, but we have also seen him up forward and we have seen him through the mid. So it's unknown what position he'll play exactly just yet. I do think he's also managing an injury at the moment, so we're not really getting too much of a read from the match simulations reports that are coming out, bits and pieces of that. So we're not getting too much out of that. So it's really hard to tell at this point in time. But he is just that mix to fixer guy for me. So he can play wherever, and that's my concern with, if they're going to be struggling as we expect they will be. Are they just going to throw him every now and then, forward or in the middle, stuff like that? So I'd rather him have this consistent role where he can be be the best player he can be in that position. Whether that's a full-time midfield role or a half-forward role. But ideally, I'd rather him in the halfback. Obviously, we know that's sort of the best position there is at the moment in terms of fantasy. So uh, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But he is coming off the best fantasy season he has, so he is the most expensive he ever has been. So like I said, priced at 79, really high compared to what he has done in the past. He's gone back to 70s the last 2 years, and even before that, his top was 73. So he's never been super fantasy friendly. He's been more of this impact player, but that's mainly because he's always been changing his roles. Like he's never had a super friendly role that's just allowed him just to accumulate the ball. So if it's obviously one you got to watch, and one that if he does get the right role, he can absolutely rack up. I don't think there's a player in the AFL that if they're given the right role, we talk about probably the most fantasy friendly role is the halfback of North Melbourne. I'd say if you throw anyone back there, we saw Jaden Stevenson average an 80 back there, so crying out loud. So I don't think there's a player in the AFL that, if given the right role, they won't average very well in terms of fantasy. It's just, does he have the upside to really make this impact and be a top six top six forward for us? I'd say he'd have to push 90, so that's 11 points upside on what he is priced at now. I just don't know if I see that just yet without knowing more about his role. But definitely, if he's given this halfback role, the ball's going to be back there a fair bit. So that there's definitely potential. So it's just one we got to wait and see. My gut feeling says it's very unlikely. I still think he's going to be used as this sort of Mr. Fix-It role. I think he will spend a bit of time forward. Just looking at their team, I just think, Elijah Hewitt, he's probably going to spend a lot more time in the midfield than a half forward, so that opens up a spot for them. Jack Graham, obviously more of a half forward, but he's obviously very injured as well, so he may be in and out of the side. I can just very easily see him spending more time on the half forward rather than this defensive half than what people are expecting. So one I'm keeping an eye on to start the preseason, but very unlikely for me to start at this point in time unless I see more. And like I said, he's in the rehab group, so he's not off to the greatest start in terms of having the best preseason. So it's still early. I won't knock him out just because he's part of the rehab group. There's a lot of players in the rehab group at the moment just because they're getting their bodies, fit and firing, just ready to go as they slowly introduce into the preseason. So not writing him off just yet, but definitely one that I'm concerned about. But we'll keep an eye on. The next player is one that's probably not spoken about too much, but he is a potential mid-pricer in terms of a ruckman. Now, that is Matt Flynn. So he is priced down at 61, so 622k is probably the most cheapest ruckman you could go with in terms of your your R2, sorry. Only played the 4 games in 2024, only played the 9 games in the year prior to that, and that was when he was at the GWS, obviously made the trade from there last year. Had a lot of injuries in last year, so he had a tendon detached from his knee and hamstring that kicked off his season, so he was out for a little while. Sorry, a lot of while, I think until mid part of the season. Came back for 4 games, and then he had an injury, an ankle injury that finished off his season. So really just didn't get on the park and didn't get the full fitness. So I'm keen to see what he can potentially do with a full preseason. Putting all the injuries behind him. We have seen that he is a decently fantasy-friendly ruckman when he does get the opportunity as a solo ruck. The only thing that concerns me is that the Bailey Williams is the other ruckman at West Coast, and I don't see him getting that spot. I think they're pretty secure with Bailey Williams being that second ruckman, or even being the main ruckman, and then Matt Flynn comes in as another stable tool marking target up forward. So it's one that I'm keeping an eye on, but I think it's very unlikely that it will happen. But just looking at his his waffle numbers in the ruck, he's easily averages 85 ish in that sort of range. So he's one you got to keep an eye on. I think he can definitely push closer to that 80 mark, so 20 points under is what he's priced at. It's just really that question mark is, a lot of people are talking set and forget. You're on Martian Cherries, then you've even got the likes of, a Gorn, or you're going down to a DeConing who's still priced at like a 90. So this is that real step back, and it's really, you're going to be losing, 20 or 30 points each and every week because he's that far away from the pack. Is that money you're saving in this position going to be made up elsewhere? Is the question you got to ask yourself. And I'm just not sure I'm quite there just yet, because I still believe that the rookies that we're going to have on field are going to be quite fantasy friendly, so they can potentially score just as good as a mid-pricer would. So really getting a rookie off the field may not be as beneficial as it first initially sounds, and what it has traditionally been, because just like I said, these guys have been so fantasy friendly in the draft. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It's just really depending on what role they have. But yeah, one to keep an eye on, Matt Flynn. I think he can definitely put it together if he can get his body right. I just don't know if he's right there, ready to go just yet with a few other things. I don't know if he's going to have this solo ruck role to start off with. Even in the games that he did play this season, he did play as it was like a 60-40 split. You can see 57%, 55%, 57%, and then he did get injured on the round 16 game. So he was the preferred ruckman in there in terms of the ruck split, but it wasn't by much. Like 60-40 is not allowing him to do much. So unlikely for me. So, but keep an eye on. I think he's definitely one that could do something. Next player is one that is highly owned in our forward line, and that is Elijah Hewitt. He's one that I've been keeping an eye on for probably the best of 18 months. I was pretty keen on him at the end of 2023 when, he played 14 games and he showed plenty of promise and was looking like he was going to go into the midfield a lot more, but unfortunately missed out on the entire campaign for 2024. So he's now got a full 30% discount on his price tag from that year, which was 46. So now he's priced at 32, so 332k. It's crazy to think he's cheaper than some of these other rookies draftees that we're picking up to start the season, because Law's 340k. But he battled with a lot of injuries last season. So he had a foot injury to start the season, which required surgery. And unfortunately, once he had overcome that injury, he suffered bone stress in that same foot. So just really unlucky and just really couldn't get through at all. So he missed the entire season for that. But if we want to look back at what his numbers were in 2023, I'll show you that now. So he averaged 46, like I said, over 14 games. And there was 3 games where he was sub-affected. If it wants to bloody show you. Sometimes this website gives me the shits. So where is he? Hewitt. Wish there was a way we could highlight him here. It would make it so much easier. Okay, yeah, you can see there was a few games like a 4, 17, and 11, all sub-affected. And if you remove those sub-affected games, he averaged 53. So that is 20 points under what he is priced at the moment. And I probably expect that he could easily go, a lot higher than that if he's given the right role. Obviously, what's actually available in terms of his role is we would all want to see him as a full-time midfielder. I don't think that's probably available. When you think of their midfield group, you got Tim Kelly being the number 1. Elliot Yeo was highly used in there, but does he move elsewhere this year? Harley Reid was a lot in there last year as well. I can show you their numbers. And then you had Ruben Jemby, who spent a lot of time in there to start the season, but he also dropped out in the back half of the season, obviously moving into this halfback role and potentially a key role later on. So, you've got the three main staple guys, and there is probably a little bit of, a 40% time in there that's probably available. So maybe that goes to a Hewitt. I'd like to see it, and that potentially means that he could average closer to 60 of 70. So that would be ideal. I think he's easily best 22. I've heard some arguments that he's probably not best 22. I easily think he's best 22. Like, he's a really good player. He was a high draft pick, round one last year, in 2023. So I think they will just give him time and give him a lot of game time this year. So he's best 22, so he's going to easily slot into our forward lines. It's just a matter of what his potential upside is. And I think that's probably closer to 30 points, averaging 60. He's not going to be a keeper for the year, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's going to be that good, but he's definitely going to provide plenty of value for us. And like I said, 20 points of upside quite comfortably. The only concern I currently have with him is that from the match sim reports, he is currently on a modified training program. So he's training away from the group indoors. So we haven't really seen much from him just yet. So he's still overcoming his injury. So I really hope he can overcome that quite quickly and really have a decent back half of this preseason. We're still, 45, 50 days away from round one. So we've got a bit of time, but, match simulations and preseason games aren't too far around the corner, early Feb. So if he's not going to be ready for those games, we're really not going to be seeing enough from him to be able to validate the pick. So hopefully he can overcome his injuries pretty quickly. And yeah, big watch on him. Besides that, we now get into the rookies. I really couldn't find many other options that I was pretty keen on. Like I said, they're not particularly most fantasy friendly. I probably should have said this off the top, is that the West Coast Eagles were by far the worst fantasy friendly team. It doesn't take you much evidence to show you that. They had no one average over 100 in 2024. Their top averaging player was a 91, and that was Elliot Yo. So by far the worst team. I can even show you the numbers. They only scored 31,000 points rather than the best fantasy team was 37,000. So that's nearly 6,000 points less over the entire span of the season. So they really have they can only really go up, is what I'll say, but I don't think the cattle they have is going to allow them to have that significant increase this year. So I'm not super bullish on what they all provide. So, but we'll continue talking about the next player, and that is Bo Allen. He is very, very highly owned in our defensive lines at the moment on the bench. He is priced at 301k. He is a tall, athletic midfielder that has speed and skill, but I expect he's going to play this halfback role. He luckily is classed as a defender for us. So the other thing that I really like is that he's got the body in the frame to really be AFL ready. Like, he's just got that frame about him that he could easily slot into the AFL and he should have no issues. Whereas a lot of the younger guys, particularly have sore bodies, a bit on the weaker side. I think he has the strength to really stand up and do quite well. But in terms of his fantasy average, he averaged 82 in the under-18s championship, but he also played 13 games in the waffle and he averaged just a 49. So not the biggest standout in terms of the waffle. I think maybe that's purely based on his role. I'm not 100% sure. I couldn't find too many stats on this besides this number here. So it's a big watch for me. I'm quite confident that he will play and be part of their best 22, but I'm just not 100% sure on what the role is to be expected. Like I said, there is a halfback role which we're expecting Liam Baker to take, and there's a key role. We're not expecting Bo Allen to be a key player at all. He's got the height. He's 191 centimeters, but he's not got. I don't think he's ready to take that sort of position. So, big watch on him. I think he can be good for us in terms of best 22, but maybe putting an expectation on what his upside can be. But realistically, for rookies, we're just expecting them to be best 22 and provide plenty of cash. That's what we're looking for. And the last player that I wanted to talk about was Claypool, if I can spell his name. Drafted in 2023, only played the 3 games last season in his rookie year. And that was towards the back end of the season as well. I can show you that. Oh, where is your name? Clay. There you are. So he played 3 games back half of the year, round 21, 22, and 24. 2 of those were sub affected, so that was the 2 round 21, 24. So in his only game that he played as full time, he averaged 54, and that was out on the wing. So really out of position for him as well. He is a midfielder, so ideally we want him in the midfield. But again, I don't see how anyone's breaking into the midfield group unless they're really looking to change a few things. Um, if you're looking at his, his waffle scores, let's have a look at these. Like he's pretty decent. It's not anything amazing, but it's definitely enough to provide that he's a confident player, that he can be a fantasy scorer for us incoming this year. So, and the thing I really liked was that in his draft year, he averaged 108 in the under 18s. So again, like he can absolutely rack up the pill when he's got the right role. Whether he had the right role in the waffle this year is I'm not 100% sure, but he averaged about sort of in the 70s. So enough to say that he should be good enough, and if he's getting the right role, he's going to provide plenty of coin for us. It's just whether he breaks into the side or not. Yeah, he's a cheaper option on the bench. In the bench, sorry, he's a cheaper option for our bench midfielders. So he is just classed as a straight mid. So one we have to keep an eye on. Besides that, I really didn't have anyone else. I guess a couple of honor mentions I did look into. Liam Duggan was one I was pretty interested in, but um, just given the fact that he was sometimes used as like the backup key defender for when Jerry McGovern was out, or the likes of Tom Barras was out, he would swing back half the time. Uh, but the other on the flip side of that, now that with Witherden out, he absolutely loves when Witherden's out, so he does provide a little bit of upside on that side of view. So I'm just not 100% sure if that's going to be his role. Like I said, Liam Baker coming in, does he get that role over the likes of Duggan? Harley Reid is someone I looked into as well, but I personally feel like he'll spend a lot more time forward in the coming years, just as they start to throw more bodies in the midfield. He's had his first year in there to get used to it, and now I think you'll find him a bit more in front of the sticks, playing that sort of a dusty Horn Francis sort of role, 50-50. But so I don't think he provides plenty of upside. He's priced around that 60-70 sort of range, so not a huge amount of upside. He's more of an impact player in my opinion. Tim Kelly is another one that is a little bit down on his average from last year. I think that's purely based on a few more players running through there. And Elliot Yeo obviously playing a bit more consistently through there, takes a fair few more points off of him. So he's priced around like 67 or something like that. Sorry, not 67, 87. So a little bit down on what he's done previously, but I don't know if I'm confident enough to say that he should be bounced back quite comfortably. He really didn't have any games that really affected his average, so really not really looking at him for me. So not really what I'm looking to pay out for in the midfield purely. So, but that sort of does it for today's video, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and hopefully it gives you some insight on the players that we're looking for at West Coast. Again, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of options for us here, just given how woeful they are at the moment in terms of fantasy scoring. So, but if you have any questions about any player, please drop them down below, and I'll catch you guys in the last video. Bye.